That's all right. Do we have any more than Felix on the phone? Oh, he's not on the phone either? Okay. We'll let everyone get in the room. Get started in just a minute. The power of the English language. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Because we have some big business today. When the green light is on and you push it on, it'll stay on. And then... Okay, everybody, welcome. Today is Friday, May 31, 2024. We're having a work session debriefing our 2024 conversation about the CIP, and planning for the 2025 CIP and CIB. We're noticed from 11:50 to 12:50. It's actually 11:53 now. We'll go ahead and do introductions, starting with Mr. Salt.
Randy Salt. George Martinez.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga.
Zach Johnson.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant.
Cameron Perez Verdia.
And joining us from the staff, we have
Chelsea Wardwaller, CIP coordinator at PM&E.
Gary Jones, CIP coordinator.
Can you do that again? There, now it's on. Now, Gary, would you introduce yourself again? No, it's on. Oh, you just turned it off.
Yeah.
Now it's on. Go ahead.
Gary Jones, CIP coordinator.
Thank
Public
you.
Works.
Melinda Kohlhaas. I'm with PM&E. I'm a project manager and acting director.
We also have Claire Ross, our legislative staff here, legislative director, and others as well in the room. And Miss Alto is just walking in the room. So, hi, everybody. Welcome. This work session, Mr. Kohlhaas is going to sit next to Miss Kohlhaas. So there's some nice confusion. So the work session today is part of a conversation we've been having about how to improve the CIP process going forward so that the public, community councils, members of the assembly, and everyone at large can have a better insight into how projects get created and put into the workflow and over the multi-years of the CIB and CIP. And also maybe how to improve the process so it's more meaningfully accomplished and more transparent. And so we're going to have a briefing on the process and a discussion about how it works. Then we're going to discuss the 2024 cycle and then discuss our plans for next year. And one of my goals is, and whether it happens or not while I serve on this body is TBD, but is to move the timeline of the approval process for the CIP and CIB so that it's earlier, so that the work that we do can go to Juneau and be in the hands of legislators contemporarily to the decisions. And so that when we are building our budgets and building our bond packages, the information is already in place instead of, as soon as we're done with the bonds for the year, beginning the process of asking the community councils what they'd like to see. And so that's the overall picture. And maybe staff wants to brief us on the process as it is now.
So we have a presentation, a short
Perfect.
PowerPoint.
It'll be popping right up. I don't know that we have a printed copy, but that's okay. There it is.
Okay, thanks, Claire. And thank you for inviting PM&E here today to talk about the CIP process. Once again, I'm Melinda Kolhaas. You met my team, and you'll note that we have 2 CIP coordinators, and you're wondering, okay, why is that? Well, I just want to make an announcement that Gary Jones is retiring soon. July 30th is his retirement date, and he's been with us as a CIP coordinator for 18 years. So we really want to commend his service for the municipality and for the public works departments of all of the fine work that you've done and all the support that he's lent. And if we can just think of a number, you might have touched somewhere $1 billion worth of projects somehow. Anyways, he's been great to work with and a fun guy, and he's always trying to loosen me up. So, okay, we'll try. And we're delighted to have Chelsea Wardwaller join us. Most of you know her. She's comes to us from AMATS, and she has a lot of background in urban planning and is going to be instrumental to our group and carry us forward. So they're working together through this transition, and things are going very smoothly. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Okay. So next slide, please. So in a nutshell, this is a photo representing what PM&E's mission is: to make improvements, road and drainage and all kind of non-motorized facilities, lighting, on different connectivity projects that we're working on. But this is an example of 30th Avenue that is between Spenard and Arctic Boulevard, and it's near the AWW headquarters. And it's a project that we completed just a couple of years ago, and we're still just putting the final touches on landscape warranty. But it is the first phase that we've completed for another broader projects for the 32nd, 33rd Avenue Midtown Corridor project. And the emphasis is on non-motorized facilities and an east-west travel. So this is our first phase. And I think everybody likes before and after pictures. I know I did. I know I do. But there's a lot of need for capital improvement projects, and it would be nice if we could make it as simple as waving a magic wand and getting from here to there. But there's a process involved, and there are many factors to consider. So in this short presentation, we'll be providing an overview of the capital improvement process and covering the need identification, the programming, and then we're going to follow up with a short demonstration of a new app that we unveiled last year, and it's our project center dashboard. And there's a lot of filtering capabilities that Chelsea is going to walk us through. But I want to acknowledge that our other departments are also involved in the CIP program that is administered by the OMB office. So we work very closely with our Public Works CIP coordinator and the executive leadership, as well as OMB and the administration for the direction on the ultimate proposed CIP program. Next slide. So there's a lot of need for capital improvement projects, and there's a variety of stakeholders that are all involved and different bodies that contribute to the needs list. Something that I want to emphasize is that there's also different types of projects. Of course, we're always very focused on the maintenance aspect of what's driving our projects and the deferred maintenance that we're all experiencing. But there's also things, of course, safety is always primary in all of our projects. And we also have a project focus of connectivity. You know, some of the recent challenges is just how to get across the street. So, there's active transportation goals as well as aspirational types of projects that are identified in the adopted plans. The map that I'm showing here on this slide represents the road condition grades for all MOA paved roadways. And the data is collected every 3 years. and it helps us monitor the road service levels, and it's also a requirement for bonding. And just as you can see below, it shows 20% of the MOA paved road networks are in grades E and F, and those represent the poor and failing. However, looking over the trends from historical, that's been about even. So it's not, we're not seeing it increase, but it's slightly decreasing as far as I saw recently. Next slide. Alongside the stakeholders, we also have established programs that identify the project needs. The traffic calming program has been increasingly popular with residents. We've been building speed humps, speed cushions, putting in the radar speed signs, and it's really helping the neighborhoods feel like they're taking back their neighborhood context instead of having the speeding occurring. We're making ADA compliance improvements with our our curb ramps replacements and sidewalk improvements, and working through a transition plan to make all of our assets more ADA compliant. We also have obligations to the Alaska Railroad for all of our roadway crossings at the railroads, making sure that we have adequate condition, and meeting with them annually to program those project needs.
Before we move on, Ms. Brawley had a question on that slide.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll keep this brief because I know we want to move to the others. But I just had a question on traffic calming because we have a traffic engineering department that does the prioritization and that whole process for where traffic calming interventions go. Could you just explain kind of the interaction you guys have? Because I had thought that they kind of did that other building, the construction work, but is that where you guys overlap, or maybe just explain that specific
Yes,
issue?
through the chair. Thank you, Ms. Brawley. That's a good question. So PM&E, we're one department under Public Works, so we work really closely with traffic engineering and maintenance and operations. The traffic engineering department does have a program where they administer the initial input and the collecting data and then all of the residential requests. And then they often start the designs and they set the scope. And so project management and engineering, we follow behind and help around the 65% design phase. We jump in and then we work together and start gearing up for finalizing the design and then the construction phase. So that is how we work together.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You bet.
Thanks.
So the bond funding level considerations, I'd like to reflect on the relationship between the funding levels and other factors. You know, the obvious point is the more funding we have, the sooner we can deliver more projects. Although there are often there's more attention on the CIB itself, but I just want to touch on how the 6-year program also impacts other factors. So the timeline expectation, if we have a set amount that we're targeting for the 6-year program and we're successfully getting that amount, then that has more reliability on when we can deliver the projects. And with that comes more confidence from the public in the program. If we don't achieve those levels, then some of the timelines get stretched and deferred. So what happens with that we're even finding in the design phase before we even get to the construction phase is the public has more questions about, sometimes the community members change and their community priorities change and their advocacy changes. So what we've seen is having to go back to the community, spend more time on reconfirming and re-expressing what the project need is about. So that's happened when you kind of have some of the projects stretch over this timeline. But also the tie to our staffing levels. We have a staffing level that's built to be able to deliver the projects in that 6-year, assuming that we're having those funding levels met. But we also have contracts that allow us to move nimbly to add staffing capacity through our term contractors if we do get more funding. Just want to mention that. So what we're showing in this slide is the ARTSA bond package amounts for 10 years, for the past 10 years. And what I just want to mention is the historical practice has been using the retired debt amount to set the bond funding level. But by doing so, there's things to consider how that impacts your buying power that's shrinking over time, and then being able to maintain and build projects with an expanded network and the aging infrastructure makes it challenging.
Before you,
Oh.
yeah, don't move on from this. I have a couple questions, but if you want to finish.
Okay, yep. Lastly, I just want to point out, so in the 2024 bond amount, the 47 million was about 36% higher than the previous year. And just want to note that the voter approval rating was pretty high, nearly 65%. So it shows a trend that the voter appetite is in an upward trend.
Yeah, I was going to note that too, that I just did a little back of the envelope math there. In 2016, the net present value of the 36 million is 45 million. So this year, the highest amount bond in 10 years and the highest approval rating, which is an interesting feature. But this is an important slide for members to understand one thing as well. When she talks about the staffing levels, we are the stewards of the 5-year CIP and CIB for the budget for this year. So we set the priorities with the departments on what projects are in what year on their recommendation. And we do have the authority to move those things around. But a lot of folks as members want to see their project done this year because it's my project. And the challenge is really a staffing problem. That is, there can only be so many projects that the staff we have can fund, plan, implement, and build in any given year or cycle. And so having your mind wrapped around how much we can pack into a year, plan into a year, and then actually achieve in the time that we have is a very important variable beyond just wanting to get a project on because constituents want it there. It's that human resources side of the equation. So I just want to kind of put that out there, Meg.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I'm going to ask as follow-up, so maybe I'll just ask it now, is, right, when we look at these bonding amounts, I'm really curious how much of that is replacement of storm sewer and storm pipes, right? I know we often do it in conjunction when we're also going to do a road project, but I'm starting to investigate how much of our bonding capacity are we using for that particular use. I fully believe in project alignment, but I want to start to filter out that dollar amount. So that will be kind of one of the follow-ups. It's not necessarily with regard to CIP, other than it gets stuck into the cost of some of these projects with CIP. And the question, of course, is, are there other ways to pay for that and make those funding streams align so that we have more potential capacity for the other parts of what we fund in the Arts Bond, while still being able to maintain or take care of delayed stormwater pipe infrastructure. Thanks.
I don't imagine anybody just knows that, but maybe. No?
it's a question to take back.
Okay, great. Melinda?
Something that I'd like to comment on, that's a good point. I don't have any breakout available, but, Gary's shared, boy, look, back when we were able to do all this resurfacing for this X amount. Well, okay, we've got inflation in play. But not only that, it was now we're at a point where not only do we just get to resurface a road, but now we have to address the aging storm system as well. And not just the pipe itself, but even consider upsizing. We have different criteria that has been set that is increasing our capacity for the storm pipes as well. But yes, it does make the overall resurfacing job more expensive because of that.
Yeah, I would just note that the Assembly created a stormwater utility, and it exists still. It's just an account at this time. So there are probably strategic ways of managing those issues, but we'll talk more about that later. So, okay, next slide.
Okay, moving forward, we get to put Gary on the hot seat, and he'll talk about our CIP process.
As Melinda alluded to, the timing of the developmental process is established in municipal code and administered by the Office of Management and Budget. This slide shows the timing of some of the steps required in the formation of the capital improvement plan. The last item on the chart is the legislative project requests get submitted into CAPSIS. And of course, that has to follow the assembly approving the CIP, usually in November, and the legislative program. So it technically occurs the next year. That's why it's last on the list. From Chelsea and my role as the Public Works Coordinator, the development of the CIP is a year-round activity necessary to consolidate all the project needs identified throughout the municipality into the 6-year funding program that provides guidance to our project teams and informs the public. So once a project need has been identified, a determination is made in consultation with other municipal staff as to whether or not the issue can be resolved, say through street maintenance or traffic engineering. But if it's decided the project will require more time than the other departments have access to and resources for, then Chelsea will add it to our database that she's going to demonstrate to you in just a minute. And that includes any new project needs identified, say, from community councils. Now, the departmental process kicks off where I'll ask each of our project managers how much funding they need for each of their active projects over the next 6 years and break it down by year. So then we compile those results from all of our existing active projects into one list, with the hope of keeping each of those projects on schedule. So how do we make then the prioritization decisions? Because obviously the need is far greater than the demand. So the next slide, we have a scoring committee that evaluates projects based on the criteria that you see here on the slide. And the committee consists of 7 representatives from various public works departments. Each of those people bring a different perspective to the table. Each of them is talking to members of the community or attending community councils. And so they all bring valuable information, which this exchange of information with the committee regarding each project provides us valuable insight into aspects of the project that we may not have considered before. So it's an education process for each of us. And the end result is a process that best reflects all of the municipal interest. That is our goal. Once the public works priorities have been established, the CIP can be built with higher priority needs program in, say, the next year bond or in the near term years, and lower priorities then get pushed back to the out years of the CIP. And unfortunately, many projects that are priorities get pushed off the CIP entirely because we don't have the resources available to address them within the 6-year timeframe of the CIP. So although community councils and the public are eager to have projects completed quickly, Public Works is constrained by the resources available for project needs, and we're forced to make the tough choices. All right, now Chelsea's going to demonstrate the Project Center database as we've endeavored to be as transparent as possible to the public in regards to our project information. And this is a fantastic tool we developed a year ago.
Sorry to interrupt.
Junction.
Sir, sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
Gary.
yes.
Can we go back one slide, Miss, or maybe one more slide? There. Go ahead, Miss Burley.
Yeah, I just had 2 questions before we got past the timeline. The first one is, because you mentioned it's in code, to your knowledge, has there ever been a public input process other than the community council surveys, or is that just really how we've always funneled all of the public input on this?
Ms. Brawley, through the chair, as I stated, our jobs really are year-round process. We are, anytime we can get a phone call from any member of the public. We engage with the legislature, drive around with legislators so we can exchange that information. What are you hearing for constituents? What are your priorities? So we can take all that information. We have a lot of contact with traffic engineering, with street maintenance, finding out what their priorities are. So we combine all that information. So it's not just a one-time, but it's an ongoing process. But at some point, we have to take all that information and distill it into a priority list that allows us to produce a CIP.
Thanks. And then my other question, just briefly, is the CAPS, how things go from CIP to CAPSIS? Because, I saw the CAPSIS list. It was basically, as far as I could tell, every project in our 6-year priority list, and there was no internal prioritization or culling down of that list. Then that's what went to legislators. So I'm just wondering, is that really what happens every year, that it's the 6-year list of projects, or is it 1 year? Kind of what do we actually give legislators in CAPSIS?
Ms. Brawley, through the chair, the CAPSIS that you see in the CIP usually is those projects that may be priorities for community councils and others, but we can't squeeze the funding into the next 6 years of bonds. It's still a priority. We want to acknowledge that. And so the previous administrations have asked us to kind of use the Sears catalog approach and enter all the project needs. So we have like 130 for public works. And that then allows the legislators to determine which are real priorities for them.
Okay, thanks. That was just something I'd wondered. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Cameron, go ahead.
I would just want to ask this quick question. You had mentioned that you're year round and that you want as much public input as you can. Is there a one-stop place to have the public give you an information about a need that can sort of cover all of these? And that's, I guess, my question is, what's the one person or the one phone number or the one place for the public to inform you, so that they'll know that they'll be responded to and that will be considered?
All right, Mr. Perez-Verdilla, through the chair, that phone number is 343-8446.
Right. So
That's now Chelsea's number.
Right. So that's the one option is to make a phone call to that phone number.
Yeah, or email.
Or email. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a tracking of that so that there's acknowledgement that person was heard and responded to. Is that correct?
That's when our process begins to evaluate and decide, is that project a capital project that's going to require additional funding, or is it something that street maintenance can go out and pave this particular area or redo a curb line and address it in a quicker manner? So that determination is made. If it is a capital project, then we add it to the database.
So if I might, we have that www.muni.org/ANCworks, and it kind of takes you to a list of potential engagements with the various departments, code enforcement and others, camp notices, all kinds of things. And if I think Mr. Volland were here, I could channel him a little bit to say, and this kind of, I think, gets to the illusion that was made by both Ms. Brawley and Mr. Perez-Verdilla, that maybe there is something to be developed that is a broader community opportunity to provide input, much like we have our forums every assembly meeting. You can send us a communication that says, I'd like to talk about this item, or please do this or that. And the reason why that might be interesting and of value is that we have stationed our community councils as the gatekeepers of community improvements, but there are tons of people who don't engage in their community councils, don't feel represented for whatever reason, don't have time, they're not part of that clique. And so there has been some talk about the possibility of, in the same timeline, generating a public portal for projects to be proposed, presented, listed, communicated about, to provide an opportunity for those folks who might otherwise be outside, that's systematic and not just, let me leave you a call and hope you get back to me. So just a thought on potential future options. So. Right, move on the slides, I guess.
And if I could just respond to that, Chair. Additionally, if you look at the criteria, not only is there a criteria for support by community councils and elected officials, but there's also a criteria for supported by affected residents. So we do already capture some of that in the scoring criteria that we have currently.
Right, but is there a system by which members of the public broadly can know to engage, or we can direct them to, that isn't, hey, you need to go to your community council and participate in a 4-hour conversation to talk about your 2-minute priority? And so, let's come up with a system that does that. It takes the burden out of you being responsive to every phone call and achieves that goal that's stated there in a way that's meaningful. It's good. Melinda?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do agree that Anchorage Works might be a good repository to collect some of this. One thing that even knowing about the project center dashboard, it's so buried right now into our homepage that I'm not sure the public would really even navigate and trip and fall on it. So we are going to be working on making some of these tools and resources more broadly obvious on how to
That's
reach
super
us.
critical, how to do it. And, some of you were involved in the creation of the online checkbook conversation. And the next phase of that is probably through ArcGIS, because it's such a good tool to provide members of the public the opportunity to zoom in on the project in their neighborhood and see who the contractor, project manager, timeline, funding source, all of that information is. So in a perfect world, we get to a place where this stuff is so readily accessible that it becomes second nature to the public to get there. We just have to dream it into existence and pay for it.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Project Center dashboard, and I'm going to take you to the live screen, but just wanted to show this link. I did work with Heather Holland to create a short link. As you probably know, muni.org, if you're within the municipality, that you can't do muni.org, you have to put www in front of it. But if you're sharing this with the public, you can just say muni.org/PMNE projects. Unfortunately, it was working. The short link was working earlier this week, and it's not working today for some reason. But the short link does exist, and I'll hopefully Heather's normally very prompt on getting things resolved. But
It could just be this building, because I have the same problem in this building. If I do muni.org/anything, it doesn't work, but if I put it in, so.
okay, well, in theory, I would love for you to share that short link with your constituents moving forward. Just know that maybe today it's not functioning for some strange reason. But this is, if it's not working for some reason, you can navigate through the Muni website to departments and then find PM&E. And then it's this first link is our PM&E projects. So again, you sort of have to trip and fall on it, but it is in there. And I just wanted to show this route in case that PM&E project short link doesn't continue to work. And then this is our interactive map of projects in development. So that brings you here, which should bring you to the whole municipality. And because I already searched a project, it's now stuck on that one. But we started with 30th Avenue. So I thought I'd just show you how you can search in the search bar up top. You can just put in 30, and that's 30th Avenue and North Star upgrades. And if you double click on it, it'll zoom in to that project extent and show you where it is. And then you can go to single project summary. And I think you will have to put it in again, but it'll give you all the information about the project, when this project was last updated, when it's headed to construction, total cost, who's the project manager and administrator. So if you need to reach out for additional questions about it. So that's 30th Avenue, which is completed now. But if you wanted to know, the larger project, 32nd, 33rd, which is broken up into a couple different phases. So we'll do the next phase, which is this one. You can learn about the 32nd and Clay improvements. So we're looking at, as of today, we're thinking construction will happen in 2027. So that just helps you. You can sort it as well. If you go back to the map, you can sort it by community council if you want to know, I think you have to switch that out, but you want to know what does, where are we here? Downtown, Fairview and downtown. And then if we go back to the whole extent, sorry, I am also learning how to navigate this map myself. It should, and then you can go to multiple project summary, and this should be all the projects in Fairview and downtown. Why are there not more projects? Do we have another thing selected?
I'm trying to submit this to.
Ah. Okay, there we go. Here are all of the District 1 projects. So you can find the status. And some of these, it includes some of the closed. So we're, as was mentioned, this tool was just launched last year. We're still working on finessing it. But, right now it includes closed projects. It includes proposed projects. So it really is a very detailed list of projects that you can find information on here. And I will pause there.
That's awesome. And it gets me closer to my dream on the open data portal. Randy.
So Chelsea, I've rooted around here before, and I like the filters and I love the screen. I can't print it. I can download it and I get the massive spreadsheet. So that's just, maybe if you could get there, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, we understand that. We have worked with GIS, and this is an Esri product. And of course, Esri does everything related to mapping, and that is one shortcoming they have. And so our GIS people, when they went to the national convention last year, they asked, is anyone developed a workaround? And there was nothing out there yet. So we're hoping that eventually that will come, because it's very frustrating for us not having that.
What about color coding? Can you do that? A series of the tables, green in construction, gray concluded, orange proposed, or something like that. So you can just visually see it. I don't want to micromanage your plan until I have a chance to really play with it, but there's some thoughts. Someone had their hand up over here. No, missed it. Okay. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I had just more of a general question, not just the dashboard. So I understand the different ways the projects get on the list, and I understand they have to be essentially costed out. So for community projects that are not already on the CIP and someone wants to submit them, so my understanding is community councils have that ability, or residents, whatever it is. So I'm going to use one example that I got in my email, which is 72nd Street, West 72nd. And we don't need to get into detail, but just a specific project. If a member of the public wants to recommend that, how does it go from that idea or that indicating it's not already on any list to the fact that it needs to somehow be costed out in order for you guys to figure out if it's even feasible? And I'm also thinking of Turnagain Street, which is a project that has been identified for a long time, but basically appears to be economically infeasible the way that it's been proposed. So it's just not on any list. That's what AMAT said anyway. So the question is really, using that example, how do we get to the point that it is costed out if it's coming from the community? Is it just contacting staff, or because that's a question that we get, is if a community wants a project, they need to be able to put it in the system in a way that it's a reality. And so how does that happen?
Ms. Brawley, through the chair, the community members, community council don't need to provide any numbers in terms of cost. That's something that we'll look at later in the process.
So basically, they just need to describe as best they can, like the street segment, what's wrong
Yes.
with it, and then you guys go and work it that way. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. Folks, there is lunch in the back. And if you want to have it, might be better than before the meeting, because it could get a little crowded in here. So just
I build on what she just said.
please, Mr. President.
This is related directly to the project she was
Michelle.
referring to, because I guess I need a little more specificity. So walk us through this. So we receive an email from a constituent that there is a particular area of road that really needs to be addressed. That's not on the CIP now. What do we need to do? What do they need to do to get that information to you so that we can know with assurance that that's being seriously considered? And how do we get information back as to what the status of that is, and so that we can continue to communicate with that constituent about what the likelihood is that? Can you walk us through a scenario of what that would look like so that we can figure out how to navigate the system for them or with them.
Mr. Perez Verderia, through the chair. Whether they contact initially our CIP coordinator or the director, I'm always funneling all of information back to the CIP coordinator so it gets captured as far as a need. But the response, sometimes it's like we work together, sometimes even on the response. But when they reach out to CIP coordinator, oftentimes, it's noted, it's acknowledged. If it's something that we can address right away, we might provide a response that we're working with street maintenance. If it's something that's going to be identified on the need list, then we're communicating that. Something that we always often communicate to inquiries is, continue to work with your public officials or your assembly member in your district or community council. We kind of always also approach it that way, just so that that need gets communicated in multiple different forums. Gary, is there anything to add?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just thought I'd interject, having sat in that department for a while, I think clearly hearing some feedback that the feedback loop could be improved. And I don't think anybody disputes that. I think we have a good process, but I think there's always room for new ideas and new suggestions. I like the idea of adding it to ANC Works. Melinda and I chatted about that just briefly. And I think finding a way, I don't have an answer right now, Mr. President, but I think finding a way to ensure that there's an ability to provide feedback to you if you're getting, any of you are getting requests for information as to the status of a project from your constituents, I think is great. So don't have an answer, but I think you can be assured we'll take that away and find a way to make that happen. I think I would just comment as an aside that there is 0.1% of projects that are brought to us by the public are projects that we don't already know about. I mean, one thing that I don't think Gary mentioned is we have a CIP list. We also have the needs list, which is it's the informal CIP list. It's the tail end of the CIP list. So everything that comes in, we track. I think the opportunity and the goal I'm hearing here is to be able to better share the status of those with you when there's community interest. So thank you.
Yeah.
And to create an opportunity for just general public input when we open the community council surveys. That's going to be a real high value. So it doesn't just have to get filtered through your neighborhood clique. So, Ms. Salto.
Thanks. So I hate to give up like the secret to success I have found to getting projects addressed, but I will share it with you all. So I get a lot of emails, particularly as the snow melts, and I've had really good success emailing Lance, the director of community development. I just forward or reply all, keep the constituent on the email. He reaches out to the team and he works it from whatever direction it makes sense. We get a response. Sometimes that response is, hey, we can do this interim thing or short-term thing, but it really should go on the CIP. Why don't you go talk to your community council? But it's really nice to get that direction from him. And it's usually anywhere from 3 days to a week, week and a half, till we can kind of figure out where the project sits. But that's really educated me a lot too, staying on those, watching how they're navigated through the department, what's possible, what's emergent versus what's maybe longer term, or if it's already on the list for the longer term solution, but it's just in really bad repair. I spent the spring talking to community councils about the pothole number, but if your whole road was potholes, to just reach out directly so that we could go and get it routed so someone could take a look. So I found that to be a really great workaround when people are contacting us. Thanks.
That's probably the Ms. Braga.
Yeah, this is not a specific question, but kind of in the spirit of, as we're thinking about, how to do this process better. The thing that I want to put on the table is really big picture, because it's coming up actually in multiple conversations, which is to what extent do we prioritize projects based on a plan, criteria, right? That kind of like a really disciplined, rigorous kind of, here's how we decide where things go. And then how much of our processes are just inherently political, right? And I think it's both. And the description of we give 6 years of capital projects to legislators and let them choose, that is a fundamentally political process. Granted, our end of the process did go through this, and there's a logic behind what is on that list. But I just want to kind of give that as a contrast to what we're talking about, which is that we collaboratively work together. We take in all this input, and then we have basically a rationale for why those projects were prioritized, right? As opposed to I like this one, or my constituents said I want this, or whatever it is. And then our part of the process is also inherently political because we have the power to move things on that list, right? And hopefully we're not doing it arbitrarily, but there are reasons why that happens. And often it does happen at the end of the process, right? When we're approving the budget. So I think the thing to put on the table is really, because the downsides of doing that is it undermines all of this process. And I think a lot of what people are talking about really is not feeling like the public, right? That the process is not necessarily transparent. And I think they're saying that when they see their specific projects not get prioritized, right? So it's not that there is favoritism that's happening. But I think it is just a black box. And so I think what we're trying to get to, the big picture, is kind of unpacking that, understanding how it works, where can we improve it, recognizing that it is always going to be somewhat of a political process, but how can we make it less so? And then again, really thinking about, when it goes to the end of the process, the legislative process, whether it's ours or the state, there is that shuffling around, but how can we make sure that the product that we're putting in is as prioritized, equitable, et cetera, as possible, and really fair. So again, that's not a question, but I just want to put that out there because it's really part of a conversation, multiple conversations that have been happening around how we choose things, how we fund things, where they get funded, and who benefits from that. So I think it's something just to keep thinking about as we continue on this process.
I would just offer that there are a few assumptions you put in there that may not be generally shared or uniformly shared, and that is that members would want to streamline to such a process that their authority to propose changes gets minimized or reduced because it's already hard enough to make anything happen for your district. And someone whispered, because we have short terms, only 3 years. And so I wouldn't operate under the assumption that everything you said is what generally is agreed upon, but it certainly is the premise for a broader conversation. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure I am not represented to be one who says we should strip away the Assembly's authority to help prioritize projects, because I wouldn't want to do that. Anna?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I'm not suggesting that either, because it is a political process and it is a legislative process by design ultimately. So I'm also not advocating that. I think it's just something to think about, because if we go too far one direction, there is no flexibility. If we go too far the other direction, people don't trust the process. And then to the point about the bonds, they don't pass if people feel like they're not benefiting the whole city. And we're not in that situation, but I think it's just a tension that I think we have to keep thinking about what is the right balance.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, go ahead, Mr.
should I have
Weiss.
just a moment?
Yeah.
I do want to recognize very valid comments, and I support many of them, most of them. I just still want to acknowledge that the process that PM&E uses and traffic and other entities to rank projects is apolitical.
Right.
The only potential introduction of politics into that is there's recognition that we're asking the voters to support 20 or 30 or $50 million worth of bonds by vote. So we do, when I was there, Gary does, and Chelsea will, make an effort to distribute projects geographically. So
Right.
it's not political, but it is recognition that we need to benefit all the citizens to the degree we can. So the other comment that I don't know if was made is regarding CAPSIS in the state legislature. I think everybody's aware that up until 2013 or so, we got $50 to $100 million a year in bonds. And since then, we've gotten one bond for one project, or grant rather, for one project on Jewel Lake Road. We just don't get the funds we used to, which has really hampered the department's ability, the city's ability to deliver those services for the public. So,
Which also, when you look at the budget documents, there's a whole column of this is just a pipe dream, and it's where all the numbers are, where it says 2 million from the state, 10 million from the state, 4 million. It's like, oh, here we are, nothing, a whole lot of nothing. So I have Karen and then Randy, and then we're going to wrap it up with Claire.
Thanks, Chair. I've been involved in making CIP lists and still am fuzzy. So I feel like it's a difficult thing for community councils. And so I think they used to do a little training program, but the community council presidents could go to help figure out how to basically enter the data. But some real direction, like only state-funded projects or municipal projects. Just so a lot of times, I don't think people know what should go on the list. Is it the big things that you want that will have to be bonded for? Or, you wouldn't put down a road project that's just potholes because probably the PM&E could handle it. But one of the things I find is kind of frustrating is there used to be some division like parks, and you ranked parks projects in your area and road projects. And I kind of feel like it'd be nice to get back to what are our top 3 park projects, like if we looked at Northeast, and what are the top city-owned road projects, and what are the top state projects, what are the top drainage? Because to me, it's kind of hard to rank those together as a giant list of, is getting an inclusive playground the top of the list, or is fixing drainage in Regal Mountain, so just ranking them separately, I think would be kind of important. And then the age-old question that keeps coming up is the project that never goes away. So Northeast they do not want Boundary Avenue extension, and it comes up every year. And we've been assured that Boundary Avenue won't be extended, but they're still going to put it on their CIP list this year as no, just to make sure everybody knows it's a no, because it keeps propagating itself onto our lists. So there's some of those I think every district has some of those projects, like the Blue Dot Bridge. So thanks.
Ms. Bronga, through the chair. So the more actively we're keeping that list up to date, the better information that will then flow through OMB back to the community council surveys. So like if I'm able to toggle that Boundary Avenue extension closed, then hopefully that won't be seen again coming forward.
Right.
But we also are talking internally, like how do you score and rank the different types of projects? So, there's a lot of different criteria that's used for ranking. Something that we just looked at recently is how do you rank a project need for a failing roadway with a more aspirational project? So there is the factors that we have to go through and look at them and be able to assess some sort of scores, but understanding that it's not just one against the other. There's different kinds of projects.
So, but there, I
Acknowledging your
think she
comments.
spoke to a dilemma that a lot of councils face, that every year projects get added to their list that they've removed every year for a decade, and they've never added them. They've always said, please remove. And that oftentimes they're projects that are other districts or citywide priorities, and they would never be that community council's priority. And there's a real frustration in that process, because it's like, it's the echo of not being heard. And so this is something I talked to Lance with 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, and it's a problem that never seems to resolve itself. And so I want to make sure that point was captured in that conversation. Like I could take you through the Fairview Community Council's list, and there are like regional priorities that don't even touch their district that are always just there. So, and I don't think we're going to solve that today. Randy?
Yeah, real quick, and you don't need to respond back, but kind of along the same line, how do you break down projects by dollar value? Because I may have one area that has one project, it's a great project, it's $10 million. You never put it on the books. But I have another area, again, equally great projects. They're all $50,000 projects, and I seem to get them every year. So how do you ensure that that balance exists between the big projects and the little projects, so that make sure that either one, usually it's the little projects never get done, but either one gets in the mix? And I think you just spoke to it with the previous answer, so.
All right, Claire, close us out.
Thank you. I wanted to recap next steps. The reason why we had this work session today, it came out of a meeting last fall. Last year, the Assembly did make getting on top of this project a priority. So last fall, we created a new schedule, and that was to add this work session in May or June to debrief on the past year. And we didn't really get a chance to do that in the discussion. So just please think about what went well, what didn't go well for you all in the last year with the legislative requests and your bond packages. And then note that we will meet up again in August to do a more deep dive on what the assembly priorities are for the 2025 CIB and bonds.
And there's a discussion at the Budget and Finance Committee, I think, that's going to begin kind of tapping back into what are our budget priorities. I think it's probably a reaffirmation of what we've been working on so that that can be communicated to the administration early as they begin to develop the budget so that hopefully we come to a point when the budget comes out, it's a budget that we all generally align to. And so, which is how we used to do it way in the old days. And so with that, I want to thank you all for coming, and hopefully this is a new paradigm or an old paradigm renewed that we brief and discuss in depth with the departments, the good work and how we can do better for the people. Thank you.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yep.
And yes,
And we'll be adjourned. Thank you. We'll be back and we have a special meeting that starts at 1.